Jimmy Kimmel. There are hundreds of severe cases of OMB, ultra bad. There are hundreds of severe cases of the disease OMB spread throughout the mainstream media. For example, Caitlin Collins at CNN. Katie Roo. Doctors at Woke Memorial Hospital, they have diagnosed Ruru with a stage 1 case of OMB. Now, at this particular stage, symptoms are generally mild. Most common symptom at stage 1 is a complete lack of charisma, along with the inability to draw an audience on television. At this point, Katie Rue could do her show in a bikini and lonely men still would not watch. The Yentas on the View. They have been diagnosed with stage 3 OMB. Now, of course, this diagnosis is rather controversial. It's up for debate. Normal people believe the Yentas are suffering with symptoms commonly seen in patients at stage 4, but doctors at Woke Memorial, they claim that the Yentas on the View are only at stage 3. I'll let you decide who you believe. Whether the Yentas are at stage 3 or stage 4, it really doesn't matter because there is no one, and KC means no one, suffering through a more severe case of OMB than pretend late night comedian Jim Kimmel. I am actually concerned for Jim Kimmel. This diagnosis, it's got the potential to be dangerous. There are 4 stages of obsession. First stage is the initial attraction. Jim, he entered this stage around 2015 when he was having strange, maybe even unhealthy thoughts about the leader of the orange race. Stage 2 is the anxious stage. Now, this occurred maybe a year or 2 later for Jim when he was experiencing feelings of neglect. He was worried because the Trumper continued to ignore him as he continued to deliver unfunny jokes on a nightly basis. Now, at the time, Donald Trump was a little busy running the country. He didn't have time to worry himself with some doofus hosting the last place dump in late night television. The third stage is the obsessive phase. Jim entered this phase sometime in 2020 when he was obsessed with making sure his temporary deity John Biden defeated Trump in the election. Which brings us to stage number 4, the stage that Jim Kimmel has been in for the last 3 years now. The destructive phase. Obviously, symptoms of this phase include destructive behavior. Something like, I don't know, tanking ratings in late night television? Well, KC, that's simply not true. Jim Kimmel was the #1 show in late night. Yeah, that's what the mainstream media will tell us. The mainstream media, they love serving that shit sandwich. Once again, this is a partial truth. Jim Kimmel is #1 in the 18 to 49 demo. That is true. But Greg Gutfeld is the real king in late night. And Jim Kimmel continues to lose to Steph Colbert. Now, of course, he is beating the other Jim in the ratings, but let's just be real here. Everyone is beating Jim Fallon in the ratings. The other night, Mr. Clean was broadcasting from the WNBA dump. He was demonstrating how to use the latest model of the Swiffer from Taylor Swiffer. As boring as it was, there were more people watching a bald fossil mopping the porta potties in the WNBA dump than there were watching Jim Fallon. Last night, Jim Kimmel, he delivered a 17-minute monologue. 17 minutes of the most boring television you can imagine. 17 minutes where his obsession with Donald Trump was on full display. You want to know why Greg Gutfeld is so successful in the late night genre? Greg Gutfeld is not a comedian. To be perfectly honest with you, I don't find Gutfeld to be all that funny. But you know why he is so successful? Greg Gutfeld is different. There is no difference between Steph Colbert and Jim Kimmel. There's no difference between Jim Kimmel and Jim Fallon. Every late night host on the broadcast networks, they are all obsessed with the same man. They are all vying for the attention and affection of Donald Trump. All Greg Gutfeld has to do is show live footage from the White House or the Delaware dungeon. He doesn't need writers. He doesn't need a teleprompter full of jokes. All Greg Gutfeld has to do is show daily footage of John Biden, and the 2 or so million people in his audience, they will laugh their ass off. According to the mainstream media, Jim Kimmel and Donald Trump have beef. Now, just to be clear, this is not a 1990s or 2000s rap beef where two participants are competing with each other to see who can deliver the best punchlines. This so-called beef between Jim Kimmel and the Trumper, it is completely one-sided. Outside of a post on Truth Social that Trump posted during the annual disaster known as the Academy Awards, I don't think Donald Trump is paying any attention to Jim Kimmel. I guess he's like the rest of us normal people in America. When we are scrolling through our guides late at night, we all pretend that Jim Kimmel doesn't exist. Last night, Jim Kimmel continued his obsession with Donald Trump. The first 90 or so seconds of his monologue focused on March Madness. He made a couple of bad jokes about March Madness costing woke corporations throughout America millions of dollars in lost revenue. Dancers like Jackie Mahomes at Club Shay Shay, they are too busy watching the women's tournament instead of grabbing the cucumber pole and shaking their milkshake, hoping it will bring all the boys to the yard. After 90 seconds of focusing on March Madness, the symptoms of OMB took over. Jim Kimmel delivered a painfully boring soliloquy, the same exact soliloquy his viewers have heard countless times since 2015. Now you gotta remember, this is supposed to be funny. When you're a late night comedian, there's really only two objectives: entertain your audience and make them laugh. It's that simple. Watch this for yourself. You tell me if there's anything remotely entertaining or comedic about this.
The great white supremacist has until Monday to come up with a $464 million bond, or the state may seize and sell his property. Trump said nobody has ever heard of anything like this before. Trump needs cash, and we never heard of most of the crazy stuff you do before, but I mean, nobody ever heard of the president changing the weather with a Sharpie before either. Tells me over the weekend Trump's going to start talking about how strong Vladimir Putin is, and suddenly a dump truck full of rubles will pull up and cover this for him. But of course, the real loser here is Melania. She may end up with half of the nothing he owns now. I hope she got an advance on that prenup, because if you think she hates him now, wait until he's poor.
Oh, Jim! You know, it would be one thing if these jokes were actually funny. I don't have a problem with late night comedians making jokes about the Trumper. Hell, Trump gives them plenty of material to work with. They could joke about his comb over, or the fact that a dude that's almost 80 years old still has blonde hair. If it wasn't for the dump divers in the WNBA, Donald Trump, he would be the ideal spokesman for Just for Men. It ain't that difficult to come up with good material, yet for some reason, with a staff of experienced Hollywood writers, Jimmy Kimmel continues to deliver a polished turd. There was absolutely nothing comedic about that monologue. ABC, they would be better off airing reruns of General Hospital or Days of Our Lives, whatever fucking soap opera that airs on ABC during the middle of the day. They would be better off airing reruns of Shark Tank in Jim Kimmel's time slot. Well, KC, what about re-airing that day's episode of The View? Yeah, believe it or not, that's a great idea. Now, don't get me wrong, The View is absolute garbage, but at least it's comedic garbage. I won't lie, I find myself laughing when the whoopee cushion unleashes her boodle breeze on the audience. I find myself laughing when the whoopee cushion hikes her leg and fills the studio with toxic gas. Every once in a while, the incoherent rambling of Big Red Joy Behar can be funny. Even when she's sitting there silently, though, doing what she does best, collecting a paycheck while contributing nothing, I still watch in amazement as her shoulders work to balance that Superdome-sized head. You could fit 68, 70,000 people in there. At least the space would be used, because right now, there is nothing going on up there. Last night, during the brief seconds that he was talking about March Madness, Jim Kimmel managed to do something that hasn't been done in the last 10 or so years on his show. For a very brief moment, Jim Kimmel said something that was true. He was talking about lost production during March Madness, and he said, "Hey there, lonely men, I'm going to go ahead and warn you guys, I'll be busy watching March Madness, so tomorrow night's show, it is going to be terrible." Tomorrow night's show is going to be terrible. Well, I'm glad you're finally admitting it, but let me ask you something. If tomorrow night's show will be terrible, how in the hell is that any different than every other show? I have been following this show for the last few years because Jim Kimmel supplies me with endless content for my channel. There is no telling how many hours I have wasted watching clips of this show. In all those hours, you know how many times I have laughed at Jim Kimmel? None. There hasn't been a single joke delivered by Jim Kimmel that's made me laugh. Hell, there hasn't been a single joke that has made me smile. Every time I watch, it's like I'm watching the destruction of this dude's career. Earlier, I mentioned that there's no difference between this trio of huge embarrassing failures hosting late night shows on network television. Last night, guess who was the primary focus of Jim Fallon's monologue? Orange Man Bad! I didn't check Steph Colbert, but I would imagine it was the same for his dump. I'd also be willing to bet there wasn't a single joke made about our fearless leader, John Biden. I can tell you with almost 100% certainty there wasn't a joke made about our pretend vice president, Cam Harris. They're afraid to make jokes about Cam. If you joke about Cam, you risk being charged with a dual violation of the woke commandments, mythical misogyny and mythical racism. I have said it so many times before, but I'm going to say it again. Compared to the era of Leno and Letterman, Conan O'Brien, ratings are down significantly in late night television. Since 2018, ad revenue has declined by... I can't remember the number off the top of my head. I want to say it's 50% at minimum. I know the Tonight Show used to generate around $340 million a year in ad revenue alone, and now the three shows combined are drawing close to the same number. Either way, these shows, they are no longer cash cows for the networks, and they are incredibly expensive to produce. But declining ratings and revenue, that is not the only thing these shows have in common. The biggest problem at ABC, NBC, CBS, the host. Normal people can't relate to the host. Normal people don't find them to be funny, and as a result, normal people are not watching. I believe normal people make up about 90% of the overall population in America. Politics aside, I'm talking about normal conservatives and normal liberals. The woke shitfucks, they make up the other 10%, and that is who late night hosts are targeting. They are targeting 10% of the population, and they are splitting that audience three ways, which is why their ratings suck. But give me your thoughts. Jim Kimmel delivers another embarrassing monologue focused on Donald Trump. Is anyone more obsessed with the Trumper than Jim Kimmel? I want to issue a challenge to you guys. Find me one entertaining segment with Jim Kimmel. Over the last 3 or 4 years, I challenge you to find one comedic segment, one entertaining segment from Jimmy Kimmel Live. If you find one, link it in the comments below. Like, subscribe, share the video. I appreciate each one of you guys and your continued support. Best way to contact me is by email at btlkc84@gmail.com, KC_BTL84 on Twitter. I'll see you guys later.